Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome to the Mental Wellness Wake Up Show, a weekly podcast where growth minded, creative people come to learn best practices from both spirituality and psychology that create lasting well being. I am your host, mental wellness expert, improvised acting teacher, therapist, and coach, Dawn McMillan. Let's get to it. All right, you beautiful humans, you. Thank you for being here right now. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate you so much because these moments that we share are so meaningful to me in any number of ways. One, I feel honored that you trust me enough to listen to some of the ideas that I share. And the accountability that I have to you reminds me to practice my principles, to lean into what is true and what is helpful, and to call myself up when I start to slip into old patterns or unhelpful patterns. So you are a gift to me, and I thank you. I thank you for that. So there's been a lot coming up for me in my world, both professionally, I speak so nice, professionally and personally. It's been a lot of return to basics lately, and I think that's just the nature of any endeavor. No matter how advanced you are, you got to do the basics. No matter how many years you're dancing, you still have to stretch out. No matter how many years you've been playing your instrument, sometimes you have to do your scales. So I am allowing it to be okay that we're at basics because that's just how life shows up. So, what basics are we talking about today? The three choices that you have in life. The three choices that you have in life. The three choices that you have in life. All right. So, if you're like me, I don't like it when people tell me there's a limited number of choices. So, there's nuance within what I am about to talk about. Within each of those three choices is a beautiful spectrum of options for how to approach it. But this has been coming up a lot with clients and with me as I said, I have to hold myself accountable for practicing my principles. So what are these three choices in life? Right, I'm cutting to the chase. Accept, change, or suffer. Yeah, Dawn, we know. No one likes that when it's being brought up to them when they're in pain. And I get that. I don't like it. I don't like it when I'm in that space of I've tried everything and nothing works, or there's nothing I can do, or this is terrible. This is terrible and there's nothing I can do. That space is so deeply and profoundly painful that having some knucklehead come along and go, well, you need to accept it or you need to change it. Otherwise, you're going to keep suffering. No, no. That is not the space from which we're coming. And ultimately, it does come down to those three paths. Those paths are wide. There's any number of ways to choose one of those three paths. But ultimately, for most situations, that's what's available to you. Accept what is, change what is, or continue to suffer. I'd like to give you an example before I get into my good friend here, Russ Harris, who says it much more kindly and extensively than I just said it here. All right. I am 5'5" and a quarter. I'm 5'5". I have a couple of options about being 5'5". I can hate being 5'5". I can believe that being 5'5" is one of the worst things that can happen to a person, and it is ruining my life. And in that state of, oh my God, my life sucks because I am 5'5". It's making everything terrible. And if only I were 5'7", my life would be so much better. But no, I am 5'5" and it's terrible and it sucks and I hate my life and I hate myself and nothing is worth doing because I am 5'5". And in that space, I am suffering. I'm suffering about being 5'5". And then along comes a knucklehead saying, well, you need to accept it or change it or you're going to keep suffering. Not helpful. But let's look at it. Let's look at it. I hate being 5'5". And I think it's ruining my life and there's nothing I can do about it. Not true. There's a surgery I could get that would, I think you can get up to 4 inches. They essentially break your legs and put this machine device thing on it that holds the bone apart until your body fills in the space with extra bone and muscles and things like that. So I could go get that surgery. But wait, who has the money to go get that? All right, well, I could pull off a heist. I could pull off a heist to go get all of that money. Well, I don't have time off work. Well, as long as I'm pulling off a heist, I might as well lose my job. Who's going to take care of my family? Well, it's more important to me to not be 5'5" than it is to take care of them. So they'll be fine. Right. So it's a ridiculous example. But the point is, it is not actually true that I can't do anything about being 5'5". I can. I can. And I bring that up to point out that many of the situations in which we have come to believe that there's nothing we can do, there is. There are things that we could choose to do. What might be more accurate to say is there are not things that we are willing to do about the situation. There's nothing I can do about the war in the Ukraine. You could get yourself on a plane, stop at the guns and ammo store, buy an AK and take yourself to the Ukraine and start fighting alongside the resistance. Is that a reasonable thing to do? No. Okay, I'm making the point. I'm being ridiculous. I'm making the point. You got it. Sometimes we feel as if there's nothing we can do, and that's not entirely accurate. There are choices that we could make, but for whatever reason, those choices don't seem real, they don't seem true, or they don't seem desirable. So let's shift into those things that we can't change. Other people, for example. The past, for example. I cannot change that I was born in Kansas City, Missouri. Like, that happened. It's done. Nothing I can do about it. So when we get into the realm of things that we cannot change, we start to look into the realm of the other two choices: accept or suffer. Many, many, many times we choose suffering. We choose suffering. There's a situation that I cannot change and I hate it. So I'm just going to be unhappy and miserable and struggle and suffer because I cannot change the situation and I hate it. I'm going to assume at this juncture that you are willing to stop suffering. So that puts us into the third option, the big, wide path of acceptance. Acceptance is tricky. We don't really have great language for it. A lot of time when we feel like acceptance is about resignation, endurance, and tolerance. So I want to spend a little time with with the help of my friend Russ Harris here, about what are some options in the acceptance camp. All right, so we have to back up a little bit. And we need to talk about what makes a life worth living. What makes a life worth living? So let's talk about our values. Let's talk about our values. Values, says Russ Harris, and I agree, provide a powerful antidote to our suffering, a way to give your life purpose and meaning. Any activity we do will be more meaningful and fulfilling if it's motivated primarily by our values. He goes on, we can go to work in obey mode, hooked by rules like, I have to do this job to pay the bills. And we can go to work in struggle mode, trying to avoid difficult thoughts and feelings. For example, working helps me escape feeling like a loser. Alternatively, we can go to work motivated by our values. I'm living my values, being supportive, and caring for my family. So, values are a way of making life more meaningful and fulfilling. Anything that could otherwise be dull, tedious, or stressful can be impacted by choosing to live according to our values instead of living according to these rules that make us feel out of control and helpless. So, again, borrowing from Russ, values are not rules. So, rules are basically commands, orders, and laws imposed by your mind. If you've ever worked with me for more than 5 minutes, you will probably have heard from me about that should. Rules are shoulds, musts, have to. So that's when your brain is being a tyrant. You must obey these rules, and if you don't, something very bad will happen. So if you're feeling heavy, burdened, trapped, your brain has hooked you into a rule. It's hooked you into a rule. I have to do this thing, subtext, that I don't want to do, or I will create some awful situation. So rules contain words like have to, must, ought, should, right, wrong, always, never, do this, don't do that, can't until, I'm going to repeat that, can't until, I can't be happy until I have $100,000 in my bank account. I can't rest until I finish this entire list. Can't until, won't unless, can't because. There are so many rules. There's so many rules. There's so many rules that our tyrant brain inflicts upon us. Many of those rules programmed and inflicted upon us by our upbringing, by our society, by the social constructs that we have been born into. And there are always many ways to act upon our values, even in difficult situations. But rules, in contrast, massively narrow our options. The more strictly we obey them, the less choice we have. So rules can be helpful. Rules can be helpful, right? It's good to stop at stop signs. That's a good rule. But our self-imposed rules can keep us stuck. Those are the things like, I have to put other people first. Their needs are more important than mine. That's a rule that keeps us stuck. It takes away our choices. So if I believe I always have to put other people first because their needs are more important than mine, then in any given situation, I no longer have choices. I no longer have options. And when I feel like I don't have choices, when I feel like I don't have options, I'm now in the land of compulsions. I have to do this thing, or we create this suffering and anxiety when we don't follow the compulsion. So part of the problem with rules, in addition to making us feel stuck and commanded and compulsive and like we don't have choice, is they kind of suck the life out of our values. Because instead of, I'm choosing to do this because it's based on my values and experiencing that flush of purpose and meaning and empowerment and vitality, instead we're following this rule and we feel heaviness, pressure, obligation, or shame, guilt, anxiety. Do you feel trapped? Do you feel like you have no choices? Hear me now, believe me now. There is a rule. There's a rule that's operating in your life. There's a rule operating in your life. And the threat of a rule is if you don't obey this rule, no matter how much suffering it creates for you, something worse will happen. So you'll remember an episode from way back when I talked about, 5 ways of stopping your mind from beating you up. So that's about unhooking from these rules. You go, there you go, mind. I know you're trying to help me by giving me some guidance on how to live. I'm going to take a different approach and see how that works. Thanks. So, what do values do instead? So, values are directions, they're guidelines, they are ways of prioritizing how to behave. So, for example, and I'm borrowing from Russ here. Um, let's see, where is it? When it comes to close relationships, we might have values such as being loving and caring. So that's not a rule, that's a value, it's a direction, it's a way of orienting our life. So, to continue Russ's example, when it comes to close relationships, we might have values such as being loving and caring. But if we have a parent who is continually hostile and abusive to us, we might cut off all contact with that person because our values around self-protection and self-respect take priority. And here's where it's important, because a value is a guide and not a rule. He says this: our values around being loving and caring haven't disappeared. We still have the value of being loving and caring. They're just in a different part of our globe of values in that specific relationship. Can you hear my stomach growling? I'm sorry. So values are not rules, and they sort of shift and they flow depending. So we're still holding to the value of loving and caring in the relationships that are safe. So one exercise that can be helpful to do is to know what your values are. Know what your values are. Know what our values are. So what that means is when we are in a situation that doesn't work for us, you have the following 3 choices. And this is stated slightly differently than I shared it before. Leave, right? Change, leave the situation. Leave the situation. Or 2, and this is accept land. Stay and live by your values. Stay and live by your values. Do whatever you can to improve the situation. Make room for the pain that goes with it and treat yourself kindly. So in my ridiculous example about being 5'5", that situation, I can leave the situation, and I can leave that situation by virtue of no longer being 5'5". I can go get a surgery where I'm no longer 5'5". That's the leave. That's the change. Stay and live by your values option, the accept option, ACCEPT, accept option, is do whatever I can to improve that situation. So if I truly believe that being 5'5" is ruining my life, maybe I put lifts in my shoes so I'm taller. I make room for the pain that goes with it. Yeah, sometimes because I'm 5'5", there's a kind of suffering that happens. And what I do is I make space for the pain that goes with it, and I treat myself kindly. Someone discriminates against me because I'm 5'5". I recognize that there is pain. I allow it. I interrogate, what do I need in this moment? How can I nourish myself? And I treat myself kindly. That's the acceptance piece. Or option 3, I stay, but I do nothing to make a difference, or I make choices that make it worse. Right? Accept, change, suffer. Or in Russ's language, leave, stay and live by your values. Or stay and do nothing to make a difference or make it worse. So if you can't leave or won't leave, then you're down to those 2 options. And he acknowledges, and I acknowledge, that 3 comes naturally to all of us. In challenging situations, we easily get hooked by difficult thoughts and feelings and pulled into self-defeating patterns of behavior that keep us stuck or make things worse. I'm 5'5" and I hate it and I hate it and I hate it and I hate it. That's a lot of our default. So what I'm inviting us to is to look at that other option for those situations that we truly cannot or will not change. Let's own it. Sometimes we are choosing not to change it. Often, if we're honest, because there's some value underneath it that's being served there. So if we can find that value that's underneath it, we sometimes can help alleviate our suffering. So if I'm in a difficult relationship with a difficult parent and I am not choosing to leave that relationship, it's because my value of filial loyalty is very high, right? Okay. So now, rather than continuing to hate being in that relationship, I can lean into that value of filial loyalty. I can lean into, I owe my parents respect and gratitude no matter how they behave, if that's the value. And when it hurts, recognize that it hurts, open up space within myself for that pain, give it room, investigate what can I do to nourish myself in that moment. Does that sound like something you can do in those moments when you cannot or will not change a situation? Lean into the values that keep you in that situation. And when there is pain, make space for it and treat yourself kindly. And remind yourself that you are living according to your values. Lean into those values. I'm making this choice. I'm here because there's something that I value that is important to me, and I'm going to lean into it and thereby create more meaning and fulfilling, more meaning and fulfillment in this choice, even though sometimes it's difficult. All right, I hope this episode is clear. This is one of those concepts that is a little fraught, a little difficult, a little painful a lot of the time. So I'm hoping that by taking a little extra time with it, you're able to receive it. And if it didn't quite land, try listening to it again before you're like, oh, there's nothing in it for me. Please and thank you. Also, please and thank you. Has anyone told you lately how unbelievable you are? Oh my gosh, when I think about how amazing you are, I kind of want to do a happy dance. I kind of want to just run around going, wee, because you are so amazing. You're so beautiful. And inside of you is so much greatness. And I want to applaud you for every day that you get up and do your life. You are so fantastic. You're whole, you're perfect, you're complete, you're doing the best you can. Sometimes life's at you and you're like, I got you, life. Okay, you knocked me down for a minute. I'm going to keep on trucking. And right now, whether you accept, change, or suffer, you're still worthy and deserving of a life so spectacular it surprises even you. Hear me now. Whether you accept, change, or suffer, you are still worthy and deserving of a life so spectacular that it surprises even you. Okay, until next time.